too much. It's a pretty laid back day. Recruiting is absolutely hit a fever pitch. It's just about to get going this weekend. It'll really get going and on through July 10th, 11th, really here the next 2, 3 weeks. Florida State's going to be getting a commitment damn near every day or every other day. As far as today, Shamar Arnaud was one of the guys on Florida State's defensive backboard, which I'm curious on James and Chris's opinion, but I don't see these guys taking more than kind of 2 to 3 defensive backs. So he chose USC, but that's no big deal because there's like 5 guys on the board. We've got Booby from LSU who recently decommitted on the board. We've got Snowfall, Onis Conan another blue chip cornerback that's really high on FSU, one of these SFE 7-on-7 guys, Ladarian Clarity out of Pensacola and, kind of my stomping grounds. Plenty of guys out there. Also, Zay Thomas that we're going to find out. He's got his decision date set for June 30th. So look for that. I believe that works out to be maybe Sunday. So we'll find out from him, another DB, whether he will be a Knoll. And just kind of got our defensive backboard cleared up a little bit with Shamar Arnaud choosing the USC Trojans today. And we can get into that if you want. It's pretty interesting to see USC continually kind of stake their entire kind of defensive recruiting and things in the Southeast, and you just keep seeing them sign, get guys to commit, and then it doesn't last over and over again. So yet another, Southeastern guy commits to USC. We'll see if it lasts, along with guys like Hilton Stubbs and the rest of the guys that are committed out there thus far.
Yeah, USC fans had a big disappointment here in the last week with a couple Georgia commits, top-level players that made their decision at one point to go to USC, but it didn't last. And we've talked about that from a number of angles across the country in regards to just the level of difficulty. And again, I've never ran the numbers or tried to go name by name to figure out, okay, how have these commits landed? But I think we've been around this recruiting game for long enough that there is a higher probability that a team coming from outside, and I say this in the Ohio State realm because it's happened to the Buckeyes a lot. Although they pluck a lot from Florida, they lose a lot from Florida of guys that originally had commitments to Ohio State, and now USC's feeling that this off season. And so you mentioned the latest defensive back there. Did you have a pecking order? You named a bunch of guys, and I was impressed with as well is that I've already locked in on the nicknames of a bunch of those guys too.
Yeah, man.
Do you have a preference list?
These guys get started so early nowadays, with stuff like, SFE, all the OT7, the different, 7-on-7 things of that nature. So yeah, and especially with some of the names involved with that, Jabori Antone, Onis Conan and stuff, it becomes a little bit easier to just say Booby or Snowfall or something like that. But no, if I would say Greg Thomas from American Heritage is a slam dunk. I think he's all null for me. He's one of the top guys on the board. Also, I think Clarity is a null regardless. Like, I think if Florida State goes all in on him, if they decide he's a priority, I think he would be a null. I'm trying to think here, the other 2 guys here. Snowfall, the kid Onis Conan again, he's an SFE guy. Florida State really turned it on with his last official visit when they got him on, when they were able to get him on campus. And I've just heard great things about him. So I think he's a guy they really locked in. This year, there just isn't a ton it's just not a big DB year. Last year, that was an extreme kind of concentration on the staff. It was a huge DB class. Just not so much this year. It'll be huge again next year, but just not a great year for that. Like I said, I just think there's 5 of them that they're after. Shamar Arnaud is off the board, so that leaves the 4 left, and I think they end up signing 2 or 3 of them. We'll just have to see how it shakes out. If they sign all 3 of Greg Thomas, Jabori Antone, and one other one, then I could see them not end up getting Clarity and him going somewhere else. I think he's the one that may be kind of like the alternate of the group. If they lose out on one of the other three, he'll pop up in there.
Not just with Florida State, but with all the shows that we do, I got to say, George, there's so many questions that I used to ask guys like you that I stop now because it's, in a sense, not necessarily wiped out, but it's mitigated by the transfer portal. So, for example, this used to be everything, of course. And so if you didn't hit on a class or a series of classes, you'd be in deep, deep trouble. You still have to do that. You still have to obviously have the high school recruiting. It's the most important. But, and I still think that you have to approach it as thinking, put the transfer portal on the side. We can't rely on the transfer portal. We will, just like everybody does outside of Clemson, we will lean on the transfer portal when we have to, but you can't go into it thinking, you know what, we're weak at linebacker. We don't really like any of these guys. We'll just kind of let it go and we'll fix it in the transfer portal. You can't rely on it to that extent because you don't know who's going to be in the transfer portal and the quality of players. So I think you still probably have to approach it the same way, thinking this has to be our football team. And this is how we have to approach it. We need to look at certain positions that maybe are a little bit thin on the roster. And you still have to approach it from the standpoint of then when the likelihood is that obviously we're going to lose players in the transfer portal. But number two, some guys won't come through. Some positions will get hit more than others by injury. And some guys just, it won't work out. And then we'll have to go to the transfer portal. But there's always that safety net now, especially when you do it as well as Florida State in the transfer portal. Oh, we lost you there, George. Unfortunately, I think we got you back now.
Still can't hear me?
No, we got you.
Can't hear me.
We got you now.
Okay.
We
So
got you.
my mic was acting up. Sorry about that. But no, you're absolutely right. And I actually spent like 3 hours this morning debating respectfully back with Bud Elliott back and forth on this particular subject because they just put out
let's stop right there. I think that's some entertainment for the folks out there regardless. They should probably track that thread and we'll look that up and get it on here. So let me go hunting for that because I'm sure that's rather entertaining. We'll get some folks, some Florida State fans, I'm sure will enjoy that. So keep going, George.
Yeah, no, he released his blue chip rankings, the blue chip ratio, as he calls it. I've been a giant fan of it. I think it really is a great threshold tool to look at kind of the minimum talent you need to bring in to be able to compete for a national championship. I've always been a proponent of it. My only, the only hitch in my giddy up, the only thing I think that they should add to it is just, hey, it's a different world now. You're able to transfer out before you even play a snap. We literally have only had one session of the transfer portal with the multi-time transfers. These kids haven't even had a chance to get to the draft yet, and we're already at 36% of the draft is transfers. So yeah, absolutely, you can supplement your roster and that blue chip ratio with transfers. Guys, and people want to get hung up on like it's a be all or end all, like you're either a portal guy or a high school guy. No, I'm just saying, you're just saying 20% to 30% on a higher end of your portal year in, year out can be transfer portal guys. You're able to do what Florida State is doing in that you don't have to follow the same old structure that it used to be. Okay, you need 30 guys, and it's got to be 5 D linemen, 4 DBs, 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, 1 quarterback. You just don't have to do that. Florida State is able to go heavy wide receiver and DB one class, heavy offensive line, defensive line, according to what's available through the high school ranks that year. And it just so happens maybe there's some good defensive linemen in the portal. Bud's idea, his take is that the true game changers, the best players in the sport, simply don't hit the portal. I disagree with that. There was, 5 or 6 of them in the first round this year. Florida State had 6 top 100 guys. Literally, 36% of the draft was transfers. Our biggest disagreement there is I would include the top 100. The first 3 rounds of the NFL draft, that means you were an elite game changer guy. And you cite guys like Dalvin Cook. You cite guys like Braden Fisk, Keon Coleman. These are all game changers. But yeah, I just think that within that blue chip ratio metric, if a blue chip leaves, it should go away from your ratio. And if a blue chip comes in, it should add to it. And his ultimate kind of answer is like, look, man, I'm going to stick with my ratio that keeps picking the national champions. And my ultimate response to that is kind of, very true. Like I said, I'm a big fan of it. But if you did what I'm talking about, if you fixed it by, counting the guys that 247 deemed blue chips in the transfer portal, if you counted those, and if you took away all the people that left Miami for the portal and no longer with that team, you would just get a more accurate ranking. Instead of Michigan being 53% of whatever they were last year and there being this giant gap between them and a Miami, you would be able to look at it and say, oh, actually, Michigan is more talented than Miami. And, the same thing across the board. So I don't think it would change it that much. I think Florida State would just maybe be the one team that would be added into that. And it would just give you a better way of fleshing it out. But yeah, no hate there, just a respectful conversation about where we're going in the sport and how it's applied.
Yeah, it's a great point on your part there. And everyone, follow George at the Renegade Report. We've got the conversation there with Bud Elliott, the back and forth pulled up on the screen. But it's a good just reminder, everyone, to follow George on social media there. Yeah, you just bring a great nuance to it. Is it still a great statistic, a great resource? Is it still a great indicator? Yes, yes, yes. Bud Elliott's one of the great minds in the sport. However, it's not as good as it once was, and he could adjust that to keep up with the times. Yeah, we just have a million examples of it. And if this last 2-year run of Florida State is not a great example of it, I don't know who is. Quarterback, running back, two best wide receivers, on and on. You go to the defensive side, the best playmakers up front. Absolutely.
It's just really unfortunate, not to beat a dead horse, that we didn't get to watch it. I understand that Florida State kind of is the anomaly. Like I said, if you counted this, it may drop one or teams out, two teams out, put one or two teams in, and yeah, FSU would have been one of them. And it's like, but we didn't ever get to see FSU compete for a championship. We will never know. Yeah. So yeah, big fan of the blue chip ratio. It just confounds me that, if, in my opinion, if 247 labels the guy a blue chip, you can decide. If you decide, and some of the arguments are, you know, just because he was a blue chip in high school doesn't mean he's necessarily a blue chip when he transfers. It's like kind of like a guaranteed miss, but it's like, I'm fine with that. You know what I mean? If he was a blue chip out of high school and 247 deems that he is now a 3-star, then that's fine. They don't get credit for it. But I just don't see why the team that he transferred from should get credit for it. Like, under this current way it's being applied, Juice Landry, like, Northwestern gets credit for him, and he never even made it to spring. He transferred as a true freshman. So, but yeah, all respect and love there. But it's just, as the data keeps coming out, I feel like it's going to continue going in one direction. And just through the nature of guys moving up, there being so many college teams and people that used to be stuck at lower level teams, group of 5 teams, whatever the case may be, a Braden Fisk that would have never had the opportunity, a Jermaine Johnson to be able to transfer again, all these different things. I just think we're going to continue to see great evaluations by guys like Mike Norvell and guys to continue to move around the country. Like, another argument is you can say, oh, well, yeah, there was 5 quarterbacks and that were transfers that were taken in the first couple rounds, but they were just following their coach and they were just this and just that. But big coaches move every year. Like, so these things, they're going to continue happening. And yeah, it's a fun conversation for sure.
I think we've got a number of categories that could be kept track of, and they're all valuable. You can start with the original blue chip ratio, and it's still a great indicator. But can it also, when you bring in the other factors that have happened since those guys were signed into play, then you get a good feeling for who's doing a better job of developing talent, who's doing a better job of acquiring transfer portal talent, and who's not. For years and years and years and years, you could look at Wisconsin,
Yeah, if
Michigan State, a few other teams, and
you
their
could
blue
pull up
chip
the blue chip
ratios, and they
ratio.
were developing talent past that, and you give them credit for that.
100%. If you could pull up those teams, we could kind of look at it, and I could kind of run you through kind of what teams maybe should be ahead of each other there. I mean, just it's on the thread.
Oh, okay, I got you. You tell me.
It'll be the only picture.
Oh, I got you.
See if I can search it up.
I might have already.
So when you look at the bottom half of it, you've got Notre Dame at 67%, Clemson at 64%, Florida at 63%, the University of Miami at 61%, Penn State at 61%, USC at 59%, Michigan at 56%, and Auburn at 53%. Now, and it's a threshold. I get it. He's just saying it's a threshold for being able to compete. But if you're going to tell me that Auburn, USC, Penn State, Notre Dame, Clemson, Florida, and Miami have all met this threshold to compete for a national champion, but Florida State hasn't, you've lost me. And just looking at this, Michigan with their 56%, I haven't done the math like I have for Florida State. I know Florida State would be up there about dead even with Miami and Florida, up a little bit above 60% when you look at their blue chip ratio, including outgoing and incoming transfers. I'm willing to bet Michigan, if you did the same exact thing, their percentage would probably move up. If you're looking at Alabama and Georgia, it may go down a little bit, it may go up a little bit. They recruit crazily. Texas A&M's guaranteed they drop down a substantial bit if you were to take transfers out. And just looking at that thing, we beat LSU 2 years in a row. We've seen what Texas A&M has been. We've seen what Oklahoma, these different schools on this list. So I agree, like it is a good threshold. Nothing wrong with that. I just think you could get a much better look at the true talent around the country if you just took into account the actual blue chip ratio of the squad at that time, not of if you've taken. It's become so arbitrary with the new rules. With it started out with a single transfer, now it's unlimited transfers, now there's NIL. There's so many things that have transpired, and like I said, the guys under the newest rules haven't even made it to the draft yet. So we don't have much data. We just see a giant ramping up all the way to 36% of the draft this year. And one team in Florida State with 6 top 100 picks. And if you want to compare them right to Michigan, like no mistake, Michigan was the best football team in the country. I'm not arguing Florida State was better or anything. But kind of the argument is, oh, it's all about that top tier talent. Well, Michigan only had 1 first round pick. And it was like, say what you want about JJ and what he'll do in the future. Like, he did not carry that Michigan team on his back. Like, I don't know, maybe saying one in spite of him is disrespectful, but you could definitely hear people say things like that. So after that, their next pick was, I believe, 49 or 50, something like that. So Florida State had their first rounder. They had 2 guys in the second round, 2 more guys before the next Michigan guys taken. The majority of their team, their 13 draft picks, were third round and beyond. And they were a damn good, great, just juggernaut of a football team. So there's no way in hell. Michigan was more talented than Auburn, USC, Penn State, Notre Dame, Clemson, Florida, Miami, all, half of that list, in my opinion. I just think if you actually fleshed out the blue chip rating, it would show it. And I don't think it would drastically change it. I don't.
Yep.
That's the thing. Like, the champion would still be on it. Michigan would still be on this list. They would just be favored in a better light. And maybe you get a Florida State on there. But
Michigan arguably the best.
Going to be at 50%, by next year. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Michigan arguably had the best offensive line in the country, and that was pretty much built through the transfer portal last season. Texas A&M, to get back to them at 79%, I did a rundown of that famed Texas A&M class of 2022, which by ranking is the greatest recruiting class of all time. And I did a breakdown a couple months ago I was curious, where have these guys gone? Where are they? Are they still at Texas A&M? Well, if you look at the class, they signed whatever it was, 26, 28 players. They had a fairly high ratio of players still there, but they lost 6 of the top 7 players are gone from that team. So that 2022 class would be juniors right now. This would be their big season before a lot of them would go off to the NFL. And they've lost 6 of the top 7 players, and they've lost about half the class. It was about 12 or 13 out of the 26. And again, 6 of the top 7. So it's just not their team anymore. It's just not their class. Some of them are, but most of the good players aren't. They're gone.
Yeah, for example, look at Michigan and Miami's 2022 recruiting class. Now, I don't know how many Michigan has left. I know they were right at 50% blue chip ratio. They signed 11 blue chips. But I guarantee you they got more than Miami. I don't know if Miami has a single or 2 blue chips left from their 2022 recruiting class. And this is another class in which Florida State, according to 247, only signed whatever 5 or 6 blue chips. Well, okay, yeah, on paper, Miami killed them. But none of those guys are there. And who are they replaced with? 3 stars out of the portal. Meanwhile, Florida State signed a bunch of 3 stars in 2022, and they have replaced them with blue chips out of the portal. The argument of the best players don't hit and guys transferred just because they couldn't start somewhere, that goes out of the window when you have true sophomores and the guys we had transfer from Alabama that absolutely, if they stayed, could have started, if not this year, the next year. And also guys like DJU, Sierra, Sione Lolohea, Tomiwa Durajaye, those guys all would have started at West Virginia or Oregon State. They came, for a chance at a national championship, whether it's because the coach was leaving or not. There's so many arguments, and at the end of the day, like I said, it wouldn't change it that crazy much. It would just clear things up a little bit, and for Bud's purposes, this list is just fine, and it's just a tool. But you know how fans are. Fans come out and they wave this thing around, and if you really want to act like Florida and Miami are all these levels of more talented, and the actual blue chip ratio is more than what Florida State has to some big degree. Sorry to bust your bubble, but it's just not the fact.
I've had a lot of debates this week already about recruiting rankings. For some reason, I don't know what's been in the water, but every show I've got on, and this is not a debate, but I'm just because I completely agree with you. And I do believe, I can't back this up exactly, but I look at this stuff every day, that it wouldn't change a ton, to your point, but the lower you go, and I'm not talking about low, I'm not talking about getting down to the Purdue or Georgia Tech ranks. I'm talking about, I don't think it would change much for Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, but as you start to cascade down through the top 10 into the teens, I think it would start to separate a little bit, and we'd start to get some clarification. And you could still keep this statistic, because this is a good starting point to say, this is where these classes were when they were signed, and this is how good this class would have been had they all stayed together and stayed at this university. You can still keep this statistic as the original blue chip ratio, but
high school
they lost 12 of these 26 guys, and this is what it is now. And it's just like, there is validity and credibility to actually, even if these guys didn't go anywhere, to re-ranking the classes, to say, come up with some kind of metric that says, okay, this guy was recruited and signed as a 5-star, but this is what he turned out to be. A complete bust, a 0-star, basically didn't play, nothing happened. He went off the rails, got into trouble, he's gone. So what value did he have? 0. This guy was a 3-star, low 3-star, turned out to be an all ACC player. Well, we're going to recategorize him. So I think there's value to about 3 different versions of this, but this is the starting point, and we can't stay at the starting point anymore.
Absolutely. Just so many things have changed to kind of degrade what it is. It used to be like just such an amazing thing you could look at to really parse out the talent, not just, what Bud implies about it's, the threshold for the champion. You could really look at it and discern who the talented teams were in the nation. Like, and it was pretty damn close. You would have some stuff, outliers, a Texas that always had talent and couldn't get it done. But
Yep.
for the most part, you could look at that blue chip ratio and know that was it. But just, they had the one time, then the multi time, and on and on. And I like your idea of adding multiples. This could be your high school recruiting blue chip ratio, like what you bring in for high school
Yep.
recruiting. What I'm implying that I would like to see, and what I would like to be pointed at when you're discussing who gets into the playoff, for example, is a blue chip ratio that is an actual blue chip ratio. That
Yeah.
just happens to be what he called it. That's his trademark,
Yeah.
blue chip ratio. My point is that it's just what you're looking at here is not a true blue chip ratio.
Yeah.
It is a true blue chip ratio of what they signed on National Signing Day
Yep.
for 4 recruiting classes, not what they have in their 85 players on scholarship. That's all. That's what I think. And I think it matters. I think this was
Oh,
looked at and was
absolutely it
heavily
does.
used against Florida State in that room. And I think, regardless of what size of the fence on, there should be one of these you can pick up that shows Florida State up there with their 63% and however far Miami's going to drop. Because Miami's going to drop. When you do the math of what they did recruiting last cycle, it was something like 30% blue chip ratio. Just hideous. So but yeah, I just want that represented, and I think it's very important that it be represented, whatever you want to call it or however you want to do it. But at the same time, love the blue chip ratio.
I even have names for all 3 of them. This would be your original blue chip ratio. Yours would be the current roster blue chip ratio. And then I'm also proposing, and this would be difficult to do. I'm not saying it would not be difficult to do, but to take all those players, as I suggested a couple minutes ago, and re-rank them based on their college performance.
Hit rate.
Yeah, hit rate. And that would be your adjusted, let's say, blue chip ratio. And there you go.
I like it. Yeah.
Now that would take a lot of work, but hey, there are industries and there are people at 247 Sports and all these other locales that this is all they do. So get to work on that, because I would love to see that as well.
And that's kind of my point. Like, I get where you can, well, it just so happens that Florida State is the team. It's only going to be that for another year because they're going to be over it and it's going to be a moot point. But look, I didn't make the guys blue chips. 247 took the time to regrade half of these guys and gave them a transfer portal ranking of blue chip. And the true sophomores and true freshmen was close enough. They left them with their high school grades. And it's like, Earl Little Jr., the wide receiver from LSU, there's nothing wrong. These are legitimate 4 or 5-star guys that just decided to transfer because it's a brand new era. This particular transfer portal class that Florida State brought in is completely different than anyone they've signed to date. Way more just like straight up blue chip young talent and like kind of surefire guys at the top end. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's that many more things to look into and research in college football. And it's something that, given Florida State's situation and having to learn it and understand it, I've been able to kind of research and look at. And it's pretty jarring how underrepresented it is, and just, kind of how big of portal exits versus portal entries really, really matters when you're looking at recruiting. And people get so territorial about it. They want to act like you're trying to say that high school recruiting's no good, this is no good, but 25% is a giant freaking chunk. That matters. That's a huge part of your program. So if you can get 25% of your roster from the portal, good on you. I think eventually, with what Florida State's aiming for this year and beyond, and we can go through some of the guys down the list if you want before we get out of here. They're going to be around 80% blue chip ratio. They're going to sign 22 to 24 kids out of high school every year. and they're going to sign 10, 15 out of the portal every year. They're going to have 10 to 20 leave out. Like, it's just how it's going to go. And I think with that, with that formula, Florida State will eventually, maybe it's 26, 27, we'll be able to look down the pipe of having just as much talent as anybody in the entire nation. People, they really want to qualify things and look at the 4-year blue chip ratio and all this from Norvell, but it's like nobody at Florida State is saying that the recruiting classes from 2020, 2021, and 2022 are acceptable or good moving forward, or you can sustain and be a national champion on that. But no, that's why you had 30, 40 exits for 2 years in a row. All those guys off the bottom leaving out and getting replaced with blue chip transfers and things of that nature. That's how you got up to a 63% blue chip ratio, despite all that, if you were to look at a true blue chip ratio. So after what you just saw from the 2024 class, what we see coming from the 2025 class, by the time you stack 26 and 27, the Florida State squad is going to be, it's going to be in the mix. There's only going to be 1 or 2 schools out there with a higher percentage, by any kind of margin like that. And that's going to be your, Georgia's, if they're still kicking ass, and Alabama maybe. And the rest of everybody's going to be within firing range.